Let me read to you a passage from the 7th chapter of St. Mark's Gospel, verses 31 to 37. It's the Gospel for Friday of the 5th week in Ordinary Time, Year 1. St. Mark writes, "Then Jesus left the vicinity of Tyre and went through Sidon, down to the Sea of Galilee, and into the region of the Decapolis. There some people brought to him a man who was deaf and who could hardly talk, and they begged him to place his hand on the man. After he took him aside, away from the crowd, Jesus put his fingers into the man's ears. Then he spat and touched the man's tongue. He looked up to heaven, and with a deep sigh he said to him, 'Ephphatha,' which means, 'be opened.' At this the man's ears were opened, his tongue was loosened, and he began to speak plainly. Jesus commanded them not to tell anyone, but the more he did so, the more they kept talking about it. People were so overwhelmed with amazement. 'He has done everything well,' they said. 'He even makes the deaf hear and the dumb speak.'" That's from Mark chapter 7, verses 31 to 37. And what does it suggest to us? Well, Jesus has left the pagan territory of Tyre, gone through Sidon, down to the Sea of Galilee, and goes now into the region of the Decapolis. The route of our Lord's journey is a little confusing for the reader, but the important thing is what happens when he reaches this fairly Gentile area. Let us notice what some people do at this point. They bring to him a man who is deaf and who can hardly talk. They ask Jesus just to place his hand on the man. Let us not read too much into their request, but we cannot help but notice that all they ask is not that our Lord heal the man, which is of course what they want, but that he simply place his hand on him. It looks as if things are reaching the point where some are looking on our Lord almost as a source of magic. That is to say, they seem to be thinking that power goes out of him automatically, that all that is needed is some physical contact, as one would with a talisman. Power did indeed go out of him, and we remember the poor woman who had secretly clutched at his garment from within the milling crowd, thinking correctly that if she could just touch his cloak, she would be healed. But the specific danger here is of missing the personal contact with Jesus in receiving so quickly the benefit. Christ himself was being forgotten amid his gifts so liberally bestowed. In the case of the woman in the crowd, our Lord immediately stopped, and while in his human consciousness was unaware of who had been healed, he did know that he had healed someone. He insisted on making personal contact with the beneficiary of his divine power. All through the Gospels, our Lord is looking for faith in his person. And we read how when he returned to his own town, he worked very few miracles there because of their lack of faith. Faith not just in the divine power at work in him, but faith in his own person. In our passage today, our Lord again insists on acting in a way that would show to the deaf and dumb man especially, but also to his friends, that he himself was fully involved in what was being done for the debilitated man. So what does our Lord do? He goes to unusual lengths, perhaps because of the region and the people he is now in, to show that he himself engaged in this healing with full deliberation. Each person was very much the object of his love and attention. We read, and I quote, that after he took him aside, away from the crowd, Jesus put his fingers into the man's ears. Then he spat and touched the man's tongue. He looked up to heaven, and with a deep sigh said to him, "Ephphatha," which means, "be opened." At this, the man's ears were opened, his tongue was loosed, and he began to speak plainly. Perhaps our Lord was trying to illustrate that an approach to him was to be very personal. He made it very personal. It needed to involve a personal relationship with Him. Because of the very real danger that this could be and was in fact being forgotten, He then insisted, unsuccessfully, that he and they, he, the blind, the dumb and deaf man, and they, not tell others about the healing. The danger was that people were forgetting Him and the real blessing faith in Him brings for other things they wish to get out of Him. Religion was being turned into, we might say, a technology. I have mentioned in a previous comment that I once attended a lecture on religion given by a Zoroastrian scholar. He described religion as a technology. The practitioners of religion seek to gain certain things by their religious rites, certain advantages. Now, all too often, religion in practice is just this, but it ought not be so. In the divine intention, religion is man's personal relationship with God, and the more something else takes the place of this, the less is that man truly religious. Religion gradually becomes magic and a shell of what it should be, which is a tremendous enhancement of the dignity of man coming from his advancing union with God. That is what it should be, not a technology. As we visualize our gospel scene today, we see that the healing of this poor deaf and dumb man away from the crowd and his friends involved a personal relationship with Jesus. Christ involved Himself with this man and did not simply send him off healed by a mere word. Our Lord made it abundantly clear throughout the Gospels that He wants us to ask Him for all our needs. St. Alphonsus Liguori once wrote that the reason why we do not receive more from God is that we ask for so little because of our lack of faith. He went on to stress the importance of asking for what we truly need, and insisted that the prayer of petition is of great importance in life. But in all our prayer to God for aid and support, let us truly think of God. He Himself is the object of our life and all our prayers, and we ought never allow our religion to deteriorate into a spiritual technology. It ought nourish love. It ought nourish a burning and constant love leading to a close following of Christ and to a Christ-like service of others, especially those in need. Let's think of this as we think of what we heard in our gospel today.